to term myself, I'm looking on air to speak, steady, because the longer you stay in the hospital, they are worried about families. So everything I say, for me, therefore, what is the future? And for you, you need to think bigger, much more than even what the Pan-African is doing in Manchester. What is your vision for this one? Great vision for this continent, for Africa. And the African Union has launched the vision 2063. And I think we need for it. This is what I say. The vision is an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. Is that vision? So, as far as I'm concerned, personally, God and the good Lord give me the breath, life, I want really you to make sure that this continent is first of all peaceful. Not really much. If you are conflict in Southern Sudan, if Somalia is not stabilized, if there are problems in it, so this is what I have been in for the last 30 years or so in Mozambique, Somalia, Sudan. I am now in Sudan, Southern Sudan. We are going to go there. Uganda, here in Kenya. This is happening. Choose the commitment to be our Africans. And of course, as an opportunity, there is to be more than 40% I have traveled very extensively. I live in Sudan, working in Sudan. I got married in Ghana, married a lady in Madagascar, and my son in Ghana. And I was extremely looking at my family. And I am more than I have not realized this, but in my own family, we are landed in Kuo, Luya, Kikuyu, Kamba, Meru, Indian, Yemeni, Ethiopian, Somali, Comoros, Madagascar, Tanzania. That's not bad.
The topic that I was given was which way Africa. And for me, as an African, and also think everybody here as Africans, is something must think which way Africa. And I've thought about it, I've theorized, I've postulated, and I went round and went back to where Kwame Nkrumah started. And Kwame Nkrumah told us that the way forward for Africa is a free, united, and socialist Africa. And you can go and think about it, go and read about it, but in the end, you go back to where our founding fathers started. Some people are saying that Africans are so divided, so they cannot unite. And to some extent it's true. We have many ethnicities, we have people of different shades, we have very many differences, language barriers and all that. But again, there are very many things that unite us also. If you look at our glorious history of when the black man built the pyramids or the ruins of Zimbabwe and all those other things, and then we move fast forward to the unfortunate things that have united us, and also the unfortunate things that also have united us. For instance, slavery came. It affected all Africans, irrespective of the ethnicity or the region of which they came from. And then we had all Africans again rising against slavery. We had colonialism coming in, affecting all of us. And years later, we had African people joining up and fighting against colonialism. We saw it in, whether it was armed struggle in Kenya, Algeria, Southern Africa, or through civil uprisings and all that. But we were united through those struggles. Then we come to an era of dictator. And if you look at any African country, we had people who held power by force or held these Mickey Mouse elections. Just not election, and then somebody comes in and says, oh, I wanted 90% and all that. That was something that united us, but unfortunately, a bad thing that united Africa. But we have, in the late 80s, in the early 90s, Africans coming again and plan. People in Kenya say, no, we must rise in a poll meeting here and after. We must rise against this one-party dictatorship. People in Mali, people in all these other countries. And people are united in those struggles. In the 80s, we had the structural adjustment programs coming in, of course, brought in by the World Bank, IMF, saying that the African governments must not involve themselves in the economic growth of its people. You only create conditions for private business to come in and develop the country. And our countries were ruined completely. Our industries closed down, our parastatals fell, the dictators, had a tighter grip on their countries. But we have people in the 90s, people in the early 2000s rising up against this SAP and saying, no, we need the government being involved in the social economic growth of its people. So we have a lot of similarities in as much as there are differences that we can see among ourselves. Have we made progress? Yes, we made progress. On the social front, everybody knows that Africa is living. On the cultural front, I'm sure most of you, if I ask you to mention your top 5 favorite musicians, maybe 3 will come from Nigeria, 2 from South Africa, and 1 from Tanzania. So culturally, in terms of arts, we are ahead. We are moving forward. We're moving on very well. But where we fail is on the economic side and the political side. On the economic side, we are making some good progress. We have ECOWAS, we have EAC, we have SADC, and now there's there are people working on uniting the ECOWAS, the South African government community, EAC, and COMESA into one economic bloc, which is huge progress. But where it failed terribly is on the political front. We still have Africans cannot move to other capitals, African capitals, the way they want. You want to go to Senegal today, you are told to go to the French embassy to get a visa. Or you have to get a visa on arrival. And it's a huge process. You have to have a letter of invitation and all these other things. Whereas a person from Britain coming to Kenya does not need to go to the Kenyan embassy in Britain. They just come here, they have an express line, they pay a 50 pounds or 100 pounds, and they get it. Nobody asks them any question. That is why maybe you have some terrorists coming from Britain and getting access. Nobody asks them any question. But for Africans, we have this backwardness where we block our own and we allow people from other countries just because they are probably economically superior or they are former colonizers to come in the way they want. If you look at things like language, we have relegated a language like Swahili, which by the way is the only African language of the AU. The rest are non-African. You have Spanish, French, English. Swahili is the only African language of the AU. We are not promoting it. We are saying that now where we reach, it will be very difficult to impact a common language throughout Africa. Yet, it only took maybe less than 50 years to impact English throughout Kenya or French throughout Mali. 50 years. We have another I don't like the guy, but on that front he's a good example. Kagame is a dictator here in Rwanda. The imperialist press might praise him about it. But in less than 20 years, he has managed to phase out French as the second language in Rwanda, and English is coming in. So it is something that is possible if we want. But what are our threats? Our threats are past tribalism, too greedy. Those are the biggest threats that the African has faced. We have a lot of resources. They say that Africa is the wealthiest continent, but greed does not allow us to extract these resources and share them. The second threat that we have is external, and that is imperialism. And we must continue talking about it because it is there. We have imperialism in the simplest definition is the external domination of one people by the other. So we have the French coming in, the Americans coming in, bombing, Gaddafi out of power, bombing Libya back to Stone Age, and people are not seeing these things. We've had in Cote d'Ivoire the French coming in under the auspices of peacekeeping and bombing a duly elected president back out of power and imposing their own ex-guerrilla leader who's called Ouattara. And Burkina Faso, when Blaise Compaoré was kicked out 2 weeks ago, he was aided by the French to escape into Ivory Coast. So we must be very wary. We must be able to smell, detect imperialism from afar. Because it's something that you cannot see directly, because they use their own studio. We have people like Mobutu, people like Bokassa, who are studios of imperialism, and we cannot see it. We have people like Kagame, but now the imperialists are shaking more slowly. But he's being praised all over Africa. The guy is clean, they have internet. Come on, yet you have hundreds of thousands of Hutus in prison. You have facilitated the killing of over 200,000 Congolese in DRC. That's a UN report. The biggest person who would have defeated in an election, a lady called Victoire, you have arrested her just before the election on claims that she denied genocide happened. Yet she doesn't really have that. But the propaganda that you get here and there is like, 50% of the parliament in Uganda is made of women. Women who say yes to women. But the ones who oppose it are in prison. So you must be very aware. What can we do as young people, as Africans? I think the first thing is to broaden our scope. Stop thinking about Ugusu or Kenya only. Think also of Africa. Because the moment you cross from here to Uganda, other language barrier and a few cultural issues, you will find that the same reception you have given to that person is the same one that you will be given. So, broaden our scope. Secondly, let us read. There are works that have been written, people are still writing. We mentioned Kwame Nkrumah, we had Aneka Cabral, we had Abraham Mohamed Babu from Zanzibar here. Great scholars. Read, critique their thinking. If you have better ideas, write also, start with the thinking. And then, campaign. We have social media now. Have the Pan-Africanist campaign. Ask these questions over this solution. And lastly, organize and attend forums like this that KLSS has organized, which gives us a platform to listen to various views and also we get the chance to contribute as a person. And ultimately also, you must join an organization that is Pan-Africanist in nature. Of course, my party, Social Democratic Party, is Pan-Africanist in nature. I'm not saying that you join this. You can create your own organization, but join an organization that is working towards the unity of the African people and independence, total independence of Africa. Of course, we've had professors taking us through the Pan-African Congress, People's Congress that they were. We had the second one in Uganda, I think in 1986, and it had a very important role in that people had forgotten about Pan-Africanism and it brought Pan-Africanism from all over the continent. We are having the 8th Pan-African People's Congress in Ghana in March next year, and you can participate as individuals or as organizations. So I think those are some of the things that we should follow. Let us follow such events. Let us follow the AU, the Vision 2063 that Ambassador has spoken about. And that is how I think we can build the idea of a united and free Africa and associated.
Ashira is grateful to done with your party that wants the country to see gentlemen with the age leading this country forward, because it's not happy thing that you need to have this mission. Ambassador, I met you for the very first time about 20 years ago about in high school. I have to tell you, because it looked exactly the same looks now. My time. Honorable Paul Winter, it is an immense privilege in your presence. Today, we are looking at a living hero of this country. We don't celebrate our heroes enough, but a true hero who has brought us where we are in terms of democracy. Mheshimiwa, it is a true privilege. And I pray that as a country we begin to not enough time, but I know we are familiar with the process of Professor, I think every time I see to listen to a historian, I realize how it is I know to write this, wherever I am. My name is Dr. Canadian Challenge of the Union, and the funding challenge which I think some activity with the friend. I'm born again Christian, and I am two patriots. The intention is to make a difference in society. Because I ask myself the whole course of life, and then it is to make a positive difference in the personal history. And I'm afraid this is something that we can move not just at the level that the people next to us. We talk about the principle, what is the principle? Unity. Unity, bring the people of Africa, wherever they are in the world, together. Because when they're united, we're stronger. This means you want to unite not just the two tribes of Kenya, but also all the tribes of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Tutsis and the Hutus in Rwanda, the people who live in the Sahel and south of the Sahara, the Zulus and the Africans of South Africa, the Egyptians, Christian and non-Christian, the Moroccans, whenever they are, whether they live in Africa or outside of Africa, the idea is to bring them together so that you can enjoy that greater strength with the capability. Who are we kidding? That's the question. In 1887, Henry Sibyl Williams formed the Pan-African Association and had a meeting in 1880. You know how long that was? That's 117 years ago. Why did it not happen? Where are we still stuck where we are? Let's look at our country, Kenya, today. The fact that my name is at Kuyu, and I am from wherever it is I am, that's a big difference. You can't do this. You take a machine to show off your brother because they're talented, because they're low. And you want to unite not just us, but the Africans in South Africa. I think the message that has put across is very important, that we need not ask ourselves what things we have won in the past, but look into our own lives. What have we won are we doing today now, presently? Why is it that I find it unpalatable to have somebody from a different tribe who's better qualified to take up a responsibility? When you allow this corruption. In all the principles of African Pan-Africanism have self-reliance. Independent, so that if there is one outbreak in Africa, I mean, as Africa comes together and tackle this and so on. But look at our country, we can hardly move because every corner of the country is filled with corruption. We have enough resources, 1.8 trillion budget, 1.6 trillion the year before that. Yet in our country, people are still dying of hunger. In this country, people are dying of hunger, despite the stories of hunger. You know, there are people who are, if they have a meal a day for 5 days, they thank God for that privilege. There are people who can't access hospitals today because the nearest hospital is 120 kilometers away and in between the budget country. In Kenya today, and what to make happen. Now I'm speaking like this because I believe the group I'm talking to cannot be less tomorrow. No, the level of tomorrow in primary school and secondary school. Where you are going to self-care. If someone does something different, you better ask them to think again. It's our responsibility to act and act differently. We need a united Africa because in international politics, society is such that if we don't create our own powerful voice in international politics, then we will always have to accept things being handed down to us. But before you can get there, you have to unite our own country, the own country. There's nothing like corruption that can be as well as corruption. Corruption is corruption. The difference is access. The same person who's corrupt with 20 shillings, if you get them 20 shillings, they feel like corrupt. And it's not the politician in State House, it is us. The very same politicians are just samples from the community. And unless we individually make a conscious decision, make our country better, only God will help us from. Now I was asked to talk particularly about Pan-Africanism and healthcare. I have a big passion for improving health and in the country. I was telling Ambassador earlier on that the key to meaningful healthcare system really is to improve our public sector. We have a decent private health sector, but only 15% of the population can access that. The 85% of us are stuck with public health. And unless we improve that, we have no hope for the entire healthcare job. Now, we are pretty young, and many of us will not experience this now. But I assure you, what we can guarantee though is that each and every one of us will need a functioning health system when our lives literally depend on it. At a point when it means it's a question of life and death for you specifically, you'll need a functioning system. And therefore, does it not make sense just to invest in that right now? I have seen families that have accumulated wealth over time, but because of a sudden illness without insurance, they have to send absolutely everything. In this country, if you have kidney failure, you need 60,000 per week just to keep going dialysis. That's if you have smooth dialysis. If you have complicated dialysis, what can you do? How many of our families can afford 60,000 per week? In the National Hospital, we give this provision to the families that tell them, look, if you can't afford to do this 60,000 per week for the next 2 years, don't even start. Because you sell the little money you have, spend 600,000 and you still not complete. Africa was a continent rich in university healthcare. In 2001, Abuja, we upgraded 15% of our university healthcare. There are countries that have written studies. I know that Paul Kagame has those faults, but one of the things that you have to mention is that Rwanda is one of the 6 countries, and the only 6 in this continent that have written studies. Rwanda is about 80%. I think recently the Minister of Health got an national award for progress. I mean, simple steps to creating self-reliance and having a country. We have had countries like Nigeria, Botswana, investing in healthcare. healthcare is one of the greatest factors of societal progress and economic growth. We rarely realize the value of healthcare in economic progress. But look at every single country that has prospered economically and is find a well-founded, well-structured healthcare system in the background. And before we do that as a country, we need to find ourselves in problems. Now, our own administrative healthcare has been building over the last couple of years. In 2011, I think we were like 7%. Now, in 2010, we were 7%. In 2011, that percentage went down to 6.5%. Then in 2012, it went down to 5.5%. In 2013, it went down to 4.7%. And recently, all-time low of about 2.2%. Now, when that happens, my prayer is I no longer see this doctor coming out saying, this is unacceptable, and let's teach every Kenyan come to see this. Now, I mentioned our age is higher, because when you're young, you're still very healthy, this is not affect you so much. But I assure you, it's only a matter of time. But as long as you have parents, as long as you have relatives, it's only a matter of time before the decisions you have there at a place. Now, I'll leave it at that point because of this I speak forever. But I will pray and ask that we take note of this one thing. It's not enough to think, it's not enough to have a hopelessness. It's more important to act to do something different. I don't want to come to the 84th, if I'm alive at the time, culture week, and this is beyond about Pan-Africanism. This is a new way. Does it result in something? Do we unite our country? Do we unite our continent? That question is not for the President of the Republic of Kenya. It's for you sitting right here, making a decision that will make a difference. That's what I've done for myself in the area. That's what I pray you do for yourself wherever you are, because that's how we make progress in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. The other panelists. Now we are entering our interactive session. And I'd just like to pick it up when we share that. When the scramble of Africa was happening in 1884, there was that argument that Africa is too diverse to be united. We have stripes in individual countries. The argument of Pan-Africanism is to unite our people. Is that really possible? Are we able, and you touched upon that? I'd just like you to delve a little bit deeper into that so that you understand how can we unite a continent in which the individual parts are basic conflict.
Well, first of all, is we are really doing in all these countries in Africa. We are multi-ethnic, very good. In fact, some of them are more stable than countries that are only one language group. If you take the case of Rwanda, Burundi, and Somalia, one language, one religion, one people, yet today there are others like Botswana, again, but there it is, South Africa is still, they are hanging in together, Libya, Angola. So we can go through. If we are able to build each other, and by extending and depend on the roadmap. Now, I think the first step in that roadmap is economic integration, and this is what the African Union. And I'm glad to say, here in this Africa, we are not very far. And the problem that I think were mentioned about getting visas and so on, you can now travel throughout this Africa with your ID. One needs to arrive here, you just only have the ID and it allows you. And one is also important, they don't need to work hard. So countries are beginning to, so you have this African community, which by 2015 we may have a monetary union. But already there is now common visa with the country.
It will take time, but we need to focus on it. Unfortunately, we leave all this process to the government. They are not really engaged with Arusha. We don't know how far they have gone. That is where the weaknesses are. And I blame myself because we are not engaging and pushing. So rapid integration is, I think, the main way we need to start. And then unity will depend on whether we agree on basic fundamental principles of governance. One of the challenges which we are facing now is the questioning of those fundamental principles. African Union has agreed that we will base our governance on democratic values, United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, Article 17, very good. But that is now being challenged by extremist religion. It's questioned that this is not the nature of state government. So there is an issue about the nature of state. We know we have got it, and in Africa, because of multi-religions, this is a factor which we have to deal.
Thank you, President. Benedict, specifically, you mentioned that Africa is lagging behind in terms of politics, that our economy is doing well, but in terms of politics, we're lagging behind. We've seen in the previous years, we've had uprisings against governments, against dictatorships, against laws. We've seen that recently in Burkina Faso, the problem is the constitutional uprising. Has always been at best to a level. If I in Libya, people feel that Sudan was close to such people, so you have people of the guys in uprising. And this has always brought a problem. The issue as a number of instances, how then can we as you need moving forward in terms of political representation? How can we do that?
I think first, those demonstrations and advices are very important because they help us move to the next level of organization, politics and all that. Of course, for this one can debate another day, but for me, for us, there's a few discounted elements of the very But if you look at Tunisia, if you look at Egypt, if you look at Burkina Faso today, all these uprisings are cut across ethnicity. If you look at the uprising also, if you call it that, against the war, we had the Luos, the Kuyus, everybody was there. So it is not correct to say that the uprising happened. That is why in 2007 it was not uprising, it was an ethnic conflict, and we must distinguish between these two. I think the first thing in order for us to work towards the political union is, as I said, in our brains, open ourselves up. We are very clear that we are an African. The second thing is to push for the free movement of goods and people and religion across the whole continent. As Ambassador has said, EAC is doing very well on that. Of course, Tanzania is bringing some problems, but they are slowly catching up. The second thing is, let us have some form of elective processes that unite us. On the African level, it may be difficult. But at the EAC level, my position has been, why don't we elect the Secretary General of the EAC rather than him or her being proposed by a country and on a circular basis. We can still maintain the circular basis, the rotational basis. But let us elect this individual. And once we start electing people on a regional or Pan-African level, then our connection with that region of the continent becomes much closer. If you look at Kenya today, economically, a person from Lavington and a person from Ileret in Turkana are not connected. They live in two different worlds. If you look at even at socially, they are totally disconnected. But what unites them is the political union called Kenya. And that is why we must insist a lot on the political unity. even as we continue with the economic and social and cultural unity. Because, for instance, Mandela today, guys buy, sugar from Somalia because it's cheaper, but they consider themselves Kenyans because of the political union. They have similar government structures, similar electoral systems, freedom of movement and living wherever you want. At times we don't know it's not your place, but on paper and in practice, generally, that's the case. We have a common security structure and a military structure. We have a common monetary system, that is the Kenyan shilling. We have, and all these things are political. So I think that's the only way. We open our minds and we start working towards
We just add that when it comes to political maturity, using Africa as an example, my prayer is that we move away from this artificial reasons that are currently the hallmark of our elections. For now, we still go into small tribes and there are elements of tribal leaders. The day we move to issue-based politics, in a real sense, then we move to African maturity. If we make healthcare, for example, the determinant to whether person voting for A or B, then we move forward because this is cross-cutting. The person in Mandela requires healthcare, the person really requires healthcare. So if we have the issues forming the foundation of our decisions in both the ballot, then that's maturity. And that maturity forms a basis around which we can develop great communities as a country. I think the next thing we should ask.
My next question goes to the Senior Counsel of Parliament. You have served in Parliament for quite a long time. You're one of the foremost politicians in this country. There has been an argument in this country that the politics is famous. One of the panelists has said that, for instance, Paul Kagame is a dictator and has failed the country. There are people who, like World Bank, counter-react and say Africa is growing at 4% of this country. The global index was 3%. So to them, Africa is doing well. What is your take?
There is a sense in which one can summarize the problems of Africa with failure of leadership. I think it's good occasionally to look at ourselves in the mirror and be quite honest with ourselves. Failure of leadership. First and foremost, because of corruption. I think it is one Ebola that is sweeping through the whole of Africa. It is corruption. And with corruption, everything else becomes distorted, in my view. The starting point is that we buy leadership. Talk about, yes, we are having elections. If you are carrying out good analysis, examining the dynamics of play, you will find that by and large, leadership in Africa, in the countries that responsible with money. That corruption then permeates through everything else, including ethnicity. Because instead of thinking about issues that are going to uplift the quality of life for the majority of people, then the concentration is, it doesn't matter how you get money, as long as you get money. Even here, we talk about evolution. When you carry out analysis, what we are here to be involving is corruption. And yet, evolution is key, it is very, very important. So what is an endemic sort of failure of leadership across the African countries? I think we need to own up to that and address that. But I don't intend to simply say failure of leadership by pointing fingers at leaders. I would like to encourage us to assume responsibility. Because you will hear a lot of complaints from us as people. And I keep asking, which leader ever parachuted from us to the leadership here. Who we can exist to? Even when you talk about the reading, who tolerates the reading is the people. The day that the Kenyan people, the African, assume responsibility for their destiny, then that day will see changes. Let me give one example. We are complaining a lot about corruption in the countries today. But you know, I think we are developing and we are going in the right direction. What do I say so? Because when you talk to every Kenyan about the corruption around, shall we say, for example, the standard gauge railway, it's too far removed. Even that mega corruption at the national level is far removed from Machico or Atieno. But I'm beginning to get encouraging signs. Namely, that when the corruption is closer to this Atieno, through the county government, through the governor, through the member of the county assembly, who they elected the other day, they can now see this county assembly member, amejenga kanyumba ya mawe hapa, hakuwa nayo mbeleni, amenunua gari. The penny is beginning to drop, but this is our money. And you see the demonstrations around. So, the positive thing about this demolition is that I think it's going to make the people assume responsibility of holding the leaders accountable. The minute we do that, I think we are going to change Africa. I don't want to, sitting next to a diplomat, to be too blunt. But every evening, I wonder when I'm looking at CNN, BBC covering Nigeria. Little girls who have been abducted. And it has ceased to be an issue in the federal government there. The man is busy running for section. Every girl, this. Yes, he says, no, we married the law. Nigeria is, I think, the fourth largest producer of oil. I don't know where we are going to become when we start exporting oil. So it's a corruption. And let me say, I would like to be a little bit more pragmatic and introduce a bit of skepticism, not in any way to contradict the Secretary General of President. But rather we began about talking about Africans by breaking it down into regions. We need to create regional economic and trading zones. Yes, let's continue having the African Union. But let's have economic and trading zones. This is where I'm very passionate support of the East African community. We can bring in Somalia, bring in Ethiopia, bring in Southern Sudan. We should really be going that way. In terms of sequencing, I would sequence economic cooperation rather than political union. That we shall achieve for our neighbor continent in Washington. But rather, we vet our people first, we ensure everybody has enough to eat between them, and everybody has got clean water, has got a house. Then the rest of it you can. Because it's going to be a little bit to have a political union with our friends, our neighbor, Tirania to have seven. If you go in for dialogue, nataka kila mtu aache bunduki yake huko nje, lakini yeye anaingia na masuka yake. Kama meta stop now. Let's do a nonsense. Not equal. Elections the same. Assuming for the same value, democratic value. It's going to be very challenging. Having these unions, let's have that agree. We also agree on sequencing our priorities. I mean, don't forget, it's the same African Union that elected Abiy as a chairman of African Union. So there are issues there, you know. Even today, when they meet, you know, it's their congregation of dictators by and large. So let's sequence issues of achievable economic trade and then the political union. Because by the way, once you feel it, you are going to overthrow dictatorship. I can see signs of change in China today. Because the middle class is so strong now that the changes are going to come from within China. What forms? You cannot become economically prosperous if you continue in dictatorship. So China is going to this. So I like to sort of rearrange the sequence so that we achieve where we want. So I'm not shirking your responsibility. I was there, yes, for 15 years, and I can tell you it's interesting, very challenging. I encourage the Secretary General here to attempt to go in there. Some of us have made our contribution. You want to pass on the baton, and you carry on. One of the challenges there is the issue of those shared values, you know. You try and oppose your colleagues when they are focused about increasing their salaries and it become a pariah. So there are some things where even the good people are bullied into silence. But the summary is, sisi wanaishi hao tunawachagua, even those who read, we allow them to read, and we agree, we abuse the way we say you have to see how the changes you.
Thank you again. I think the speech presents what we established economic integration. It's very interesting to know that 50 years ago, it's 10 I think I called that a session. I'd like to move and give one question to Lawrence. And the question is, and it's very relevant to Kenya today, it's the question of non-governmental organizations. Some Pan-Africanists believe that non-governmental organizations are instruments of grievance. On the other hand, the report believes that governmental organizations help in a broad range of issues, including the fight for human rights. I'd just like to know what is the perception of this in the place of non-governmental organizations.
I'm taking a picture.
Okay, I think that the reason why a lot of people perceive NGOs as foreign agents because they recently had NGOs are funded by governments who are not representing the countries that NGOs work in. And I think that argument is a bit fallacious because if it's just about funding, a lot of our governments are also funded by governments. So if NGOs are foreign agents because they are funded by foreign agents, then our governments are also foreign agents because they are funded by foreigners. I think the question of where you get your funding is important. And that's why I think that in terms of generating incomes and nurturing our resources to be independent, because I completely agree with the senior council. If we are going to sit in this place and mourn and talk about why about foreigners who are giving money to and we are going to give us money, then we also start against. I believe strongly that NGOs deserve to be funded by the government of their country. Because even those foreign donors that we talk about, that money is not citizens. It's not money that is so I think that the question is, are NGOs doing work that we understand is important? And if they are, then the funding ideally should come from government. It should come civil society is only organized civil society. So we think that ICA Kenya, Kenya, and that is what civil society is. Civil society is any group of citizens who have a common cause and want to work on that common cause. And they come together, work on it, they put pressure on different agencies. It could be government agencies, it could be private sector, but the idea is that citizens take their place in governance. And I think that for us as Kenyans, the Constitution is very clear. When we talk about participation, it means that you can participate as an individual or as an organized group. So I think that we need to look at that perspective. And I think when Africans talk about civil society or NGOs generally, I think the NGOs that they really hate are the ones who deal with human rights and government. And that is because those are the ones who try to hold them accountable. And I think that a government that does not want to be held accountable really does not deserve leadership. Because why is leadership do not want to be held accountable? So I think that governments need to realize citizens have rights, and citizens only donate their powers to the government. And when we donate our powers to the government, that doesn't mean we stop from participating in the government's process. So I believe that as citizens, we have the right to participate, whether through NGOs or through civil society or through ourselves as individuals. Now, the other thing that I think that must be clear, I think a lot of African governments and people who do not like governance NGOs love the NGOs that deliver services, the ones that provide health, and I'm sure people will be those that. So if you're providing water, you are assisting children with food they love. I think that is another fallacy. First of all, who has the responsibility to deliver on health? It is not NGOs, it is the government. It is the state that has that responsibility. And I think it is even a fallacy for NGOs to think that they can replace the state. You cannot replace the state. You can supplement what the state does, but you are not the state. And I think the idea that they are better NGOs because they're delivering is a fallacy. We need to hold the government accountable because we pay taxes for them to deliver these services. So for me, I think that there is a need for us to rethink, when especially for organized civil society, to ask ourselves, what is the real role of civil society that is organized? And I believe that they can supplement, but I think that when we hold government accountable, civil society has a greater impact because they can look at things holistically, they have views from different people, and they can organize for us advocates we as individuals are not able to do. And I think that even when we talk about Honorable Paul Ruto here, when they were fighting for this liberation, it was because they were organized. And the Law Society of Kenya was working as a civil society organization for advocacy. And it was a professional body. So we need to actually rethink when we think about civil society. Let's not just think about those NGOs that we see there. Even professional bodies, the Kenya Medical Association, all these bodies, they need to see themselves as having the role to hold governments accountable in the areas where they have it. And it doesn't matter where they get the money from, in my opinion. What matters is what are the issues that we are holding governments accountable for. And if government has no response other than to say they are foreign agents, then that's our citizens should send them a signal. What kind of government is that does not want to be held accountable? What kind of government receives money from the agencies from the US and does not want civil society to receive money from the US? So I think we need to really think about that. But let's organize ourselves as Kenyans, as citizens, to hold government accountable. It is possible. We don't have to do this. You can do it through the legislation spend. have to rely on money because ideas and numbers also count.
But this is something I'd like to welcome the public for plenary session and handle this session to the common.
Thank you very much. I'll be in the best interest of time. We will start with each row, giving us 2 questions, 2 questions, 2 questions. That means you'll take around 6 questions at a time. And any comments, if you have any. Is that okay with the panelists? 6 questions at a time. Okay, 4. I want 4 questions at a time. So we'll check. If you have a question, just have now. You can have 3.
Thank you very much. My name is Gasheke. I'm not a student here, but I am very much encouraged by the university here for organizing this event for this very fun. But my question is, and I also appreciate the senior citizen on our board, which Ambassador Doko and Mashari, and also trade unions. I think the issue of that here is very important and is a practical issue. And my comrade there was here. But my question is from which I know for a long time, and I appreciate the staff that we have been engaging for many years. You say we need to integrate. The Pan-African question is integrating region. If you look at the region of even here in Kenya, our economy is just the British satellite issue. If you look very well, there is no huge cooperative movement from Uganda, Kenya, United to do the economic empowerment. If you go to Tanzania, the mining and everything is being owned by Chinese now. So when you say we integrate regional, it's like we opening our border for free market of Safaricom. Safaricom is only Safaricom that has the right to go across the border without being asked for passport or doing other things. So my question is, can we integrate when economically we have seen an economy that is exporting coffee to Europe, tea to Europe, an improved economy? Is it possible for us to integrate in that direction? And my last question, not question, a comment. 24 years, 1921 to 1945 Manchester, there was Modoli and Jiu. Now, 1990 to now is another 24 years. I think we need another generation now to take Pan-African forward after Paul Wheaton and World Party Democracy. Because I think Pan-African has been betrayed in this country, where we only unite because of ICC, but we don't unite on the question of healthcare.
Thank you very much. The question is very important because we need to get as many questions as possible. Thank you.
My name is Rich. My name is William Eric. I'm a second-year student here at the University of Nairobi. And my contribution is that Pan-Africanism is a beautiful idea and as a whole, an excellent model for Africa to become even more powerful in the globe, the world. But my worry is that it remains just that, an idea that is impossible to implement practically because of a few reasons. For example, we have tried to brush off the issue of diversity. Ethnically, if you look at Africa, we have more than 3,000 ethnic groups, 2,000 languages spoken in Africa, diverse social and economic classes everywhere. How are we practically going to enable people from such events? The other issue is we rely on foreign aid too much. African nations cannot function without funding from, especially the Western people. And that is what brings in the idea of those people influencing our government. Look at how they got into India and destroyed the country. The country was coming up with an African currency, the gold dinar. And I think that was one of the reasons that he was formed out of power. We failed to stand up for him as Africans. And since we continue to rely on the assistance of these people, there is no way we can oppose them. The other issue is the powerful in Africa continue to grow powerful, while the poor continue to grow poor. The sovereign do not want to share or to relinquish their wealth and their power. How can we think of a united Africa when everyone is so selfish and so looking after their own interests?
Felix Silva. The first question goes to the ambassador. Yes, okay. The independence of South Africa was seen by many as unusual. Not South Africa, but South Sudan was seen by many as unusual. Yet we are still experiencing several challenges in South Sudan. Currently, we are experiencing several civil war. So, what is the solution to the problem in South Sudan?